Some storms are just statistics, blips on a radar, but others become legends. Today, we're going to dig into the anatomy of Hurricane Melissa, a storm that carved a path of truly historic destruction through the Caribbean. Let's get into what made the superstorm so powerful and, frankly, so unforgettable.
To really understand a storm of this magnitude, you almost have to hear it. And those are the words of an American tourist, Brian Taylor. He was in Jamaica celebrating his anniversary when Melissa hit. He and his wife Barbara were trapped, just listening to this monster raging right outside their hotel. I mean, can you even imagine that? The actual walls of the building you're in are physically moving. The sound of who knows what is just constantly smashing against the building. To survive, they literally had to drag mattresses into their bathroom to pad the walls and just ride it out. In that terrifying experience the Taylors had, well, that was just a microcosm of what was happening all across the island. For Jamaica, this was no ordinary hurricane. People were calling it the storm of the century. And they weren't exaggerating. Melissa made landfall as a Category 5. Now, just to be clear, Category 5 is the absolute top of the scale. It's the peak of a hurricane's power, reserved for only the most catastrophic storms imaginable. And Jamaica got hit with all of it. And here's the number that just takes your breath away: 185-mile-per-hour winds. That single number ties it for the most powerful Atlantic hurricane landfall in all of recorded history. Just incredible power. The impact was, as you can imagine, immediate and devastating. We're talking critical infrastructure, schools, homes, hospitals, just torn apart. The country's main food-producing region, its breadbasket, took a massive beating. And on top of all of that, the power grid completely failed, plunging hundreds of thousands of people into total darkness. But Melissa wasn't done. Not even close. After ripping across Jamaica, the storm barreled north over the warm Caribbean waters, and it set its sights on its next target, Cuba. So let's trace this path for a second. After slamming Jamaica as a Cat 5, the storm actually got stronger for a while over the open water. It eventually made its second landfall in Cuba as an extremely dangerous Category 3. Now, seeing what had just happened in Jamaica, Cuba prepared for the absolute worst. The government launched this massive effort, one of the largest evacuations in the country's entire history, all to get people out of harm's way. And the scale of that preparation is just staggering. Over 735,000 people were moved from the storm's projected path. This wasn't just being cautious. This was a sign that everybody in the region understood the immense, deadly threat the storm posed. Okay, so you've got this absolute monster of a storm tracking north through the Caribbean. The next logical question from millions of people was pretty obvious. Is the United States next? But then, something happened. The storm took a turn. So what was it? What saved the U.S. coastline from a direct hit by this monster? Well, it wasn't just blind luck. It was a perfectly timed atmospheric event that played out just right. The science behind this swerve is actually pretty cool. A few days before, a strong cold front had moved across the U.S. and was just sitting out over the Atlantic. This front basically acted like a giant wall in the atmosphere. It was a barrier that Melissa just couldn't push through, and it forced the storm to make that crucial right turn, heading east and out into the open ocean. A very fortunate turn indeed. So while the U.S. mainland was spared a direct hit, the story of Melissa wasn't quite over. The storm left behind a legacy of destruction, for sure. But it also raised some really important questions about how we measure the power of these historic events. And this brings up a really interesting point about how we talk about storms. What's the true strength? Is it the peak intensity a hurricane reaches out in the middle of the ocean? Or is it the strength it has when it actually hits land? Forecasts, they rely on that potential intensity. But you could argue the landfall metric is what really matters most. It's the one that measures the direct impact on people, on homes, on lives. So, what was the final toll? Well, even after turning away from the U.S., Melissa still slammed into Cuba as a major hurricane, causing massive storm surges between 8 and 12 feet. It also brushed the southern Bahamas before finally, thankfully, heading into the cooler waters of the North Atlantic, where it just weakened and fell apart. And that really leaves us with this final thought. Hurricane Melissa was a record setter at landfall, but honestly, its story is starting to feel more and more familiar. As these kinds of superstorms become more common, we really have to ask ourselves, are wind speeds and categories enough? Are they enough to capture the true cost? Or do we need a whole new way to measure the human price of a storm's incredible power?